Welcome, everyone. We are really excited about this webinar, Founders Day, Future-Proofing PropTech AI. Cloudastructure has partnered with ButterflyMX for this webinar, and we're really excited to hear what Rick and Cyrus have to share. Let's go ahead and jump into a quick agenda of what we're going to cover today. So I'll do some quick introductions of everyone on this webinar in terms of the panelists. We'll cover some of the fundamentals with prop tech technology on your properties, kind of what to look for, what to avoid, and really how to future-proof your property when it comes to utilizing AI and technology on your property. We'll end with a Q&A at the very end, but that being said, if you guys have questions pop up as we cover certain topics, please don't hesitate to throw them into the chat and we can kind of cover them as we go through certain topics. So again, welcome everyone. We are very excited to have the founder of Cloudastructure, Rick Bentley, joining us on this webinar. So Rick is, again, the founder of Cloudastructure, and he is an award-winning AI-powered surveillance and remote guarding platform. And after a laptop theft was enabled by an unplugged surveillance system, Rick really had a vision for a smarter cloud-based solution. And since founding Cloudastructure, Rick has really helped shape its growth into a scalable and secure platform which protect properties nationwide. And we'll have him dive into that story a little bit later. But again, welcome, Rick. We're really excited to have you here.
Glad to be here.
And next is Cyrus Claffey, who is the founder and executive chairman of ButterflyMX, which is the leading provider of smartphone-based access control. So he conceived the idea in 2013 after moving into a Brooklyn apartment with an outdated intercom. He envisioned a cloud-based, video-enabled solution that was as easy to use as a mobile app. And since then, he has really grown ButterflyMX to serve thousands of properties and millions of users nationwide. And again, we'll have him share his story of the origin of ButterflyMX here in a moment. But again, thank you, Cyrus, for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jen. Looking forward to today's webinar.
Yes, us as well. And just a quick background on myself. My name is Jen Free. I am Director of Sales with Cloudastructure. My background is in the operations within the property management industry. I was working on site for about 5 years, so I am very familiar with what you guys deal with on a day in, day out basis in terms of security violations, property damage. So I came on with Cloudastructure about 3 years ago, and I'm really passionate about the AI surveillance solutions and remote guarding solutions that we have to offer, because it would have made my job so much easier when I was a property manager in a regional. And I'll kind of cover some of the ins and outs of Cloudastructure a little bit down the road as well. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So Cyrus, we really kind of want to hear a little bit about that origin story. And if you could talk a little bit about ButterflyMX, we're excited to hear about it.
Listen, all I like to do is talk about ButterflyMX. Thank you so much for having us today. The origin story is like so many stories, like you touched on with Rick, which is I moved into this brand new apartment in Brooklyn. It was a 3-bedroom for under $2,000, which is kind of unheard of in New York City. Everything was brand spanking new, everything, new kitchen, new appliances, new floor, not new windows, but the windows were pretty good shape, except for one thing. One thing was not updated, and that was the intercom. And what it was is this kind of a dumpy little box that sat in the kitchen and had 3 buttons on it: door, talk, and listen. And anybody, who would come to see me, whether it was a friend, UPS guy, whomever, when I got the buzz from the front entrance, I would basically go over there. It was unintelligible. I could never hear what anybody was saying. I just kind of assumed it was my friend. So I would have to press all 3 buttons in kind of like a certain sequence to get a particular pitch. And I knew when I got that pitch, the door was open. That was about it. And so I was already working in prop tech. I live in New York City. That's where I'm at today. And I was working, it was, at the tail end of the great financial crisis. I was actually working on a big project for Avalon Bay when they were going into West Chelsea with an urban infill deal with like 450 units or something like that, just to give you guys some color and background. And you could already stream video on FaceTime with your iPhone. And what happened is I worked in the city. I was always missing packages. And so I'm a big online shopper. I would have to go down to the post office every Saturday. Hopefully I would get there before 12 or 12:30. Hopefully there wouldn't be a huge long line and I'd have to wait there and get my packages and then bring them home. The other thing was, guys, because you could FaceTime on an iPhone already, I was like, why do I even need to get off my couch, right? I've got this handy device that I take with me everywhere. Why am I not getting a video call? And that was really kind of the genesis for the ButterflyMX idea. And then the other thing was like working already in the real estate industry, it's all about look and feel in new construction. So why not put something really beautiful like a touchscreen at the front entrance of the building? Essentially, I was thinking like an iPad or something like that. And that's what we invented was essentially an iPad or a touchscreen at the front of the building, making a video call to a resident's mobile app that would work anywhere, not just in your apartment, right? But when you're at the office, when you're traveling overseas, like you're in France or something like that. And, we just hit the ground hard and kept working and grinding away, and years of going to OpTech and NAA and just kind of being there for our customers and innovating over time. We've essentially gone from that front entrance device now to the entire building. So anywhere that there's access control on your property, whether it's the parking garage, whether it's the elevators, apartment door locks, anything, you will find ButterflyMX as a solution that can check all the boxes at your property. So today we're in over 20,000 buildings, millions of users, millions of daily transactions, and just really grateful to have been on this ride, the last 10 years. So
that is great. And that is really amazing. It's always so fun to hear, the origin of how you came up with the idea. There's so many times where we're like, why didn't we think of that? But it's so fun to hear your background story. So thank you for sharing that. All right, let's do the same with Cloudastructure. So Rick, I know you have a fun story too about how you came up with the idea of Cloudastructure.
All right, yeah, happy to jump in. I was running a dot-com company back in the dot-com boom in San Francisco. We were at a company, an IoT company that was backed by SoftBank, so we had money. And we had some loft space south of Market, hardwood floors, tall ceilings, kind of retro build. And we had access control, we had an alarm, and we had a guy at the front desk, and the building had cameras. And one day, someone just dressed like any one of us walked in around lunchtime when there's a lot of in and out, picked someone's laptop computer off their desk and walked out.
Wow.
Guy comes back from lunch. He's like, "Where's my laptop?" Everyone's like, "We don't know." "Oh, but the building has cameras. Let's go take a look." So that's when I coined the term the vacuum effect. Someone had unplugged the recorder in the management office to plug in the vacuum, and it hadn't got plugged back again. And I said to the property management group, I said, wait. Like, this isn't monitored. The recordings are on site. There's no notifications when it goes down. Like, why'd you buy such a crappy system? And they said, we're running Class A property in the hottest real estate market of our lifetimes. I am the definition of price insensitive. I just bought the most expensive one. And I said, oh my God, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? So I started Cloudastructure. We pushed the video to the cloud where everything's monitored. So whether you have one location or 100 locations, you see what sites are up or down, what cameras are up and down. You get notifications as they go up and down if you want them. Sometimes it can be overwhelming and you don't. But you have a real-time dashboard of what's happening at all your properties. And after we pushed it to the cloud, we found that we had a sustainable competitive advantage. And once we had the video in the cloud, we had access to really powerful compute. So we could start to do AI on the video like nobody else could. Other people try and do AI in that teeny little chip in the camera that's been cost reduced out of China to be as unpowerful as possible. We've got big GPU clusters in the cloud, so we can tag all the objects. Let you search for bicycle or backpack. We can recognize faces. And then we took it one step further. We started to get asked by people who had a lot of locations and a lot of cameras, hey, this is really great, but I don't have time to watch it all or sort through it all or whatever. So we have the AI watch 24/7. It's looking for things like there's someone in the parking garage after midnight. Let's just use that. And 99% of the time, it's a resident going to or from their car. 1% of the time, it's a bunch of guys in hoodies checking door handles or smashing windows at that point. So that alert goes to a guard center that we have staffed all through the night. We actually do that over in the country of India time zone. because our midnight is their noon. So they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Plus they're inexpensive, right? Much less than a guard on site would be. And they look and they see what's happening. And then just like there's cameras around the network, there's speakers that are on the network. And so they can talk down. They can say, hey, you, yes, you in the blue hoodie. This is a secure area. You're being monitored by a live agent. You must leave immediately. And 98% of the time, they do exactly that, which for the property management group is a big deal because the next morning, instead of 10 angry tenants in the leasing office with 10 cars have been broken into, possibly not for the first time, while they're trying to rent new units to people who are showing up for a tour, they just have an email report that said, these guys, picture and link to video, were in the garage last night. We did a talk down, they left. So it delivers a lot more value than just a video surveillance system from Costco, for example.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rick. And as I mentioned, I am very passionate about what we offer at Cloudastructure because I have been in the seat of a property manager and I have walked into the leasing office to deal with many unhappy residents as opposed to, I really love the proactiveness of deterring unwanted activity in real time. So such a great idea. And yeah, thanks for sharing that origin story. So let's go ahead and dive into the meat of everything. So AI has been such a buzzword lately. You guys have heard it left and right. Rick, go ahead and dive into what is AI?
AI is something that always changes with the times, right? If you showed someone a thermostat 500 years ago and said, when it's too cold in the cave, this will put more wood on the fire and keep the cave warmer. And when the cave gets too hot, it'll stop putting wood on the fire and make the cave cooler. That would be magic. You'd be a wizard, and that would be AI, right? Today, we take the thermostat for granted. AI that property managers use all the time, I'm sure right now, is automated billing. A bill goes out, they got a link for a payment gateway, late notices go out, fees get added. It's all automated now, right? That's another what we now consider a pedestrian example of AI that I'm sure none of us want to do without. For AI in property management today, AI, I think, kind of is always changing its definition to be kind of the new leading edge version of things, right? And so I think security is probably the best frontier for AI in property management right now, both for access control and for video.
I would only add to that. I think the real value, folks, for you is that it can help take over routine tasks. At least that's kind of, the V1 version. And I think you're seeing a lot of products in the market that will help kind of do those things, whether they're more leasing related or billing related, as Rick referred to. And so that's really the way to look at it in terms of like force multiplier. Basically, it's going to give you back a lot more of your time to do the higher value add tasks that are going to help achieve whatever the goal is for the property, which I think obviously is always about maximizing the ROI. And then that basically is driven by trying to maximize your NOI. So it can just help you do your job more efficiently and better. And again, free up your time to do more higher value add tasks that will help drive things like resident retention, which we all know is key, especially I think in some markets today, like in the Southwest and the Southeast, where there may be, kind of a lot of supply in the market right now that's still getting absorbed.
So, Rick, you've called AI obviously a force multiplier. Can you give us a real world example from multifamily security?
Oh yeah, I mean, so what Cloudastructure does all the time, right? There's an old saying in security: how many cameras do you add until you can't see anything? I mean, you got dozens of cameras per property. You got dozens of properties already. You can't watch all the cameras. If I ask someone, "Hey, what happened in the last 24 hours at this location that has 36 cameras?" So 24 hours, 36 cameras. You have an 8-hour day. It takes you 3 days to get through 24 hours on one camera times 30. It's 100 days. Okay, maybe you can watch it on fast forward. It's an impossible task. It's a man month. It's a person month to watch 1 month of video, right? It's just unapproachable. But computers never sleep. They don't get bored. Their mind doesn't wander, right? They can watch all the video all the time and they can pick out what's important. And I think an important thing we'll talk about is making sure that you get a human in the loop when something that looks important is happening. I think computer vision is just a great example of a force multiplier. The computers filter out 99.999% of the video and then bring in humans for the 0.001% that matters.
I think you're raising a great point. Something else we're going to touch on a little bit is centralization. And centralization, Jen, as you probably know better than Rick or I, it's all about having one person being able to do more. So I think one of the advantages we'll see is that implementing AI tools kind of really across all the different, again, the routine systems that people use but have to interact with a lot, when those systems are just kind of presenting you are more proactive, it allows people to manage more buildings in a way that's just as good as if they had multiple people like at every single building, right? And that's kind of the whole goal behind centralization, is just greater efficiency. In fact, we need that in the industry because you can't even hire enough people to staff all the buildings, right? So it's something that has to happen. And what's great about technology is that it actually gives you a better outcome at a lower cost. We'll save more of the centralization until a little bit later, but I just wanted to add that to what Rick was saying, because to me, that's the total force multiplier effect in action.
Yes. Yeah, no, that is a really great point. And also, as a regional, as an asset manager, you're over multiple properties, obviously. So having that one centralized platform that you're able to log into, not having to have multiple logins for multiple different properties, it really brings it all together and just makes your job so much easier.
That's right.
So it's been mentioned, human in the loop. So Rick, it's emphasized here. How does this balance? Well, first and foremost, what is human in the loop? And then how does this balance between AI and human oversight really play out in property operations?
It's very tempting to try and build a system that's fully automated, runs itself, doesn't need any human intervention, and leave out the ability for human intervention. You can imagine a billing system that sends out a bill and the tenant's like, but wait, this is wrong because of I moved units, or I got a rebate this month, or whatever. And you need some way to get a human back in the loop to fix that sort of thing, right? And you need to have the tools and procedures in place for that. And we see it again and again for video lately. There is no human in the loop. It thinks it detected something and it sets off an alarm, and then it just thinks it detected again and it sets off the alarm again and it thinks it detected again. There's just a real need to make sure that you have a system that isn't pestering everyone to death, right? And so you need humans in the loop to make that happen, right? And we use the humans at Cloudastructure in a lot of different ways too. Our guards are busy at the beginning of their shift and at the end of their shift. The evening time, 8 p.m. or whatever, when we might start for location, and the morning time, 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., right? In the middle of the night, we're overstaffed. So we actually have them going through video and helping to train the system as to, hey, that's not a cat, that's a dog. That's not a bicycle, that's a moped. And making the system better at recognizing images. And those humans in the loop give us a real powerful advantage, because we'll talk about this a little bit later, I think, but we have humans actually helping to train the system and make it smarter. And that's happening without the tenant or the management company involved, right? It's just something that we're doing.
Yeah. And so, Cyrus, ButterflyMX talks about unified dashboards across properties. Why is that so critical for scaling multifamily portfolios?
When you talk about scale and access, at least the way we think about it, there's really like two vectors. The first is it's really like most people have a strategy. I'm doing core, I'm doing suburban, whatever it may be, a certain, or they'll build a certain type of building, right? And they're kind of building the same thing over and over, maybe with some local accents and flavors, right? But it's essentially like the same floor plan, but a different location. And so I think what's real important about that is you're going to use the same PMS across your entire portfolio. In fact, it's the bane of property managers. They got a new ownership group, and sorry, you got to go from MRI to Yardi. So, and by the way, we want these 5 systems in place as well. So the reason for that is because when you have the same system in place, it gives you the ability to have one dashboard for all of your reporting, as opposed to having to look at 3 different dashboards and then try and figure. In fact, you'll probably have to use a different software just to reinterpret all the data into a single dashboard so that you can benchmark your properties. And that's essentially what you're going to try and do as an ownership group, and certainly what the asset manager is going to do. They're going to take all that data and put it into a spreadsheet so that they can compare things. And so having scale, meaning you have the same system at multiple properties, allows you to basically have a single view that you can benchmark across everything. The second thing is your on-site teams or your regionals don't have to learn multiple systems. And that takes away, again, from like anytime you have to do that, this is taking away from your ability to manage and kind of think strategically about asset management. Now, so that's kind of scale across buildings, right? Multiple buildings. The other way that we think about scale is inside the building. What do I mean by that? Well, I think, when I was introducing ButterflyMX to everybody on the webinar here, I said, hey, we started with the front entrance, but now we do parking garages, we do elevator controls, we do apartment door locks, we do amenity spaces with our access control keep op system. So another form of scale is having everything on one platform. Because again, if you go back to that analogy I was saying about, I got one PMS at one building, another PMS at the second building. Well, having the same access platform across the entire building on all those different areas where you might traditionally buy separate systems because there was never a unified system, gives you the ability, single dashboard, your reporting is going to be much more smooth. And then I think the other thing too is from whether it's your vendors coming on site and the maintenance folks who deal with those vendors, or the residents, using a single credential to get around the whole building is just much more convenient. And I think in today's market, in today's world, right, the economy, especially with AI and the implementation of it, people are looking for convenience. We have so much coming at us that anything that simplifies that torrent of information, data streams, content, et cetera, and kind of just simplifies it for all of us is something that we want, and we want it in our lives. So you basically end up with a better resident experience.
Absolutely. We're always looking for something to simplify our job.
Yeah, exactly. We're all consumers on this call, guys. Just think about your life, right? If I have one key that works across every door that I need to get into, it's just easier. That's my take on that.
Yeah, and so this kind of goes along with human in the loop. So Rick, can you kind of explain how you go from a stock photo of a dog to actually utilizing it in real video situations?
Yeah, so I alluded to this earlier, but what our guards do with their downtime. Other AI video surveillance systems that will remain nameless go and train to be able to recognize objects like dogs or backpack or gun or whatever. And they do that off of clip art off the web, like you see on the left here. That's what they're training dog off of. It's a studio shot, full frame of a dog. He's looking right at us. It's a dog. We can all tell it's a dog. That looks nothing like what a dog sees looks like on video surveillance. The other frame there on the right, that little white blur is the dog, right? So if you are trained off the data on the left, you're not going to detect the dog on the right. Follow me? So we're actually going through, and we think we really think we're the best in the world at this. At scale, training off of the actual video surveillance data to be able to detect things off of video surveillance data. It's just that simple. AI without it is a neat parlor trick, but it's not going to work well for you. It demos well in a sales call, but it won't work great for you at an actual deployment.
Yeah. And so I've heard you warn about garbage in, garbage out. So what mistakes do you see vendors or operators making with data?
Yeah, again, this clip art training model, I think, is a great one. We see in other aspects of AI, there's a real famous one for video. I was a contractor in Baghdad back in 2004 and 2005 with USAID. And there was a project there to try and figure out which cars were going to be the ones that blew up, because they had video of them before they blew up and they have video of them blowing up. And then, okay, maybe they're riding lower because they're heavier. Maybe they have a certain driving pattern. Let's feed all that data in and see which ones blow up, because it was a really big problem. Well, they trained off of it, and the training data of the ones that blew up all had sand in the background. And then the other training data they used was from cars driving around Manhattan or something. So if there was sand in the background, the detector thought the car was likely to blow up. just because it was trained, it had garbage in the training.
Mm.
So for whatever you're doing with AI, especially if it involves machine learning, you have to have a real understanding of the quality of your data that's coming in, and that it's not corrupting your algorithm, right? And we spend a lot of time at Cloudastructure and this sort of thing to make the video AI stuff actually really useful. So you can find that person, you can find that backpack, you can make sure that the alert goes to the guard when the people are in the garage at night, whatever it is. Just something we spend as nerds a whole lot of time.
And kind of on a different topic, but similar, a lot of these property managers and regionals are being bombarded with new technology ideas every single day. Do either of you or both of you have an example of, I don't know, the kind of shiny prop tech gimmicks that you should be on the lookout for in multifamily prop tech?
You know, half of our competitors, maybe. Again, there's a lot of things that demo really well on a sales call, and things that just don't work that well in the real world. And we strive to have the latter. I haven't been to a PropTech conference in a hot minute, so I don't have any immediate examples. Cyrus, you go to these things. What have you seen?
I live for these things, Rick, actually. So, yeah, I mean, so this is the funny thing. There's always the flavor du jour. A couple years ago, it was resident apps. Before that, I think, it was package lockers. I mean, so every year there's kind of like a new hot topic. And look, that makes sense, right? That's kind of how things work. There's all of a sudden some explosion of innovation, and then kind of everybody starts to do that, and they chase that. And the one thing that stands out that I still think about to this day, this was during the whole package locker and package management bonanza, was the egg. And I can't remember who introduced the egg, but it was like a standalone thing, that it was like a standalone package locker system that looked like an egg. I was like, wow, that's kind of funky. And sure enough, it wasn't there the next year. So I can't remember who introduced it, but I'll leave it at that. So
I'm sure there's some quirky things out there for sure.
yeah, every year. Yeah.
Be on the lookout for that. So, Cyrus, you definitely touched on this briefly, but in terms of being able to offer that unified tool for all locations and talking about the centralized dashboard, what other things do you think that really adds to the benefit of utilizing prop tech and AI?
Here's the interesting thing. And, Rick's talking about human in the loop, right? And I think we all, I mean, this is actually kind of a very interesting thing. Some people in the multifamily space are going to basically no on-site staff. And, UDR talked about this. I think it was like 3 or 4 quarters ago, how they were really eliminating all the leasing offices. And it was like, wait, how can you do that? After, during COVID, self-guided touring got introduced everywhere. And basically you had to rely on it almost exclusively during COVID. And then the whole discussion was, okay, what's got a higher close rate? Self-guided touring or in-person? Well, with self-guided, it's always the same talk track. Millennials don't want to deal with people. Well, it turned out that actually in-person leasing had a slightly higher close rate. Okay, so why is UDR going with no leasing offices? Well, guess what? In their view of the world, they only need to fill 60,000 units. And there are enough people out there who don't want to interact with anybody that they can fill those 60,000 units. And you got to be like, that makes sense, right? So again, there's like a whole kind of array of strategies. What I think the industry has now kind of come to, now that we have a data set, right? COVID forward to 2025, is actually, you know what? In-person is a little bit higher close rate. But what's great about self-guided is if somebody wants to come back for the 3rd or 4th tour, or they want to come after hours, self-guided can kind of accommodate them. And, I'm kind of going back to what Rick was saying about you want to keep a human in the loop. That's just another example of where technology can be super useful, but it's good to have a human in the loop for the higher value add things. And so I think like, what's real interesting is that all of these systems, but AI especially, because of the fact that it can learn from the data set, because it can then kind of be preemptive in terms of telling you what to do or what to attend to, I think AI is going to really accelerate the ability to centralize operations. And again, remember, centralization is I can't hire enough people to staff all my buildings, right? And so if I have a bunch of co-located assets, I can put a team at one of them and they can service all those assets as basically like a team. And it's been a very kind of hard road. A lot of people talk about it. Very few people have implemented it. And I think it's because they don't necessarily have the software systems in place, or they're trying different softwares and they don't quite work. And hate to say it, I don't mean for this to sound like an advertisement for ButterflyMX, but if you don't have a unified access platform across all those assets, so that, like, let's say you've got a water leak on the roof in building 3 and you need to get somebody from Johnson Controls up there, if they got to wait for the maintenance guy to get there who's running late from the building 2, well, it basically takes all the air out of your ability to centralize. Essentially, you end up with something close to the same cost, and then people in purchasing are going to be like, well, I mean, look, for all the training and this and that, is the ROI really there on the centralization? All right, maybe not, right? So kind of a roundabout answer, but I definitely think that AI and these new tech stacks that are getting put in place that are across a portfolio are going to help us achieve real cost savings.
And to take that one step further, I'm curious, Cyrus, looking ahead, how do you see access control evolving with AI over the next 5 years?
That's a great question. Well, number one, it's obviously going to be partnering with video systems because I think those are the eyes, right? So, we were talking on kind of our prep call about if you got a door open sensor. Okay, Rick, how many cameras are there? 120 cameras. You can't watch them all, right? So you're using the kind of data image recognition patterns to say, okay, here's a place where I've got a problem, right? Because we've surfaced it with a door open sensor. And then you're looking at that. Now, do you need to tell the call center, hey, guess what? There's something here, or you can probably automatically do it, I would imagine, and then they can talk down or not. So I think that that's one great example. I just think that, there's a whole bunch of things like tailgating, which, we'll get into in a little bit, but these are all things where I think AI and kind of pattern recognition at the property itself, because again, we all know, as much as we think of like a building's a building's a building, every asset's basically bespoke. I hate to say it. So having those data sets from the actual buildings are going to help the property management team be more proactive about what they need to attend to. Because again, remember, everybody's slammed. So this is about anomaly recognition. That's how I always think of it. It's like basically surfacing the anomalies. If you need to have a human in that loop, whether it's the property manager or one of the call center peoples, right, at Cloudastructure, they're attending to it. They're making that final decision on how you escalate or if you don't need to, because it's like a shadow from the sun, coming up behind somebody in the morning in California. Yeah, there we go. Let's do some shadow puppets.
That is really exciting to hear about. Obviously, technology has come so far in such a short period of time, but it's exciting to hear about the potential that is still yet to come. All right, let's go ahead and keep on moving forward. So, Rick, this is a really important topic in terms of making sure that you own the data. And this kind of goes along with maybe some of the gimmicks that you talked about previously, but can you elaborate on this a little bit?
It seems like every company is trying to come up with a recurring revenue model, even where there isn't one. I mean, leasing a building, that makes a lot of sense. That's going to happen monthly. But BMW recently got raked over the coals because they had a brilliant idea of renting you your heated seat feature for $18 a month or something. And just the market couldn't have been less enthusiastic, right? So we see this all the time. People are like, yeah, here, we're going to sell you the cameras and we're going to find some way to keep charging you every month, even though all the storage is on site and we don't have to roll anymore. So, Cloudastructure, we do have a recurring revenue model, but we earn it. We're storing all the video in the cloud. We're providing the remote guarding services, live agents, that sort of thing. And it's your data, you own it. We're just a trusted caretaker of this data. So we do see when you're looking at sales proposals, is there a real reason why when you buy a recorder with software on it, that license is good for 3 years and you have to essentially buy another one, right? That's a pretty big CapEx layout every 3 years. Cameras last for a while. We show up in buildings with 20-year-old cameras all the time. And we're happy to work with existing cameras. Just there's a lot of devil in the details when you're trying to deploy a system, any system at a building, right? The vendor probably wants to get you into a recurring revenue model when it may not be justified. So I just, keep an eye out for that.
And so, in terms of continuous human oversight, so Cyrus, biased data and fair housing risks, those are serious concerns. What are some of the pitfalls that you should avoid when talking to a vendor to ensure compliance?
You hit the nail on the head there, Jen. I don't think anybody wants to get anywhere close to that. So I think you need, I mean, like, look, we've all heard these horror stories of like bias in the in the training sets, right? Not intentional on anybody's part, I would assume, but it can happen. So is the AI model being trained on a comprehensive data set or something that actually has some built-in biases? I think you just need to kick the tires and kick them hard on things like that, because the last thing you want is to have upset tenants or upset vendors or whomever, because it's already hard enough to operate a building without having folks up in an uproar, right? Who feel like they're being biased against or profiled.
Rick, do you have anything to add here?
Well, remember that example I made for sand in the background? Where you kind of have garbage in on the training data. Here's a nightmare scenario. I was at Google when in 2015 when Google Photos categorized some family photos as gorillas. Happened to be an African American family and tagged their photos as gorillas. And Google couldn't have had a bigger heart attack. The press couldn't have had more fun with it. It was just a huge disaster, right? So in the training data, you can imagine if you say, okay, we're trying to figure out the difference between people getting into their cars and people breaking into cars. So let's take lots of video of people breaking into cars, and we'll use that to detect when someone's breaking into a car, right? Okay. Sounds benign enough, but maybe all your training data happens to be from inner city properties that are predominantly African American, and the detector comes back and says, oh, well, if the people are African American, they're more likely to be breaking into a car. That's the sort of thing that could very realistically happen with a training data set that starts out biased. So we put a lot of effort into making sure that our training sets are a level playing field, not poisoned, not corrupted, no garbage in.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So here we're going to kind of transition into how AI and technology can really create that ROI for your investments. And so this is just a really quick video that kind of highlights how AI surveillance can create more of a proactive environment with your security.
This is a secure area. You are being watched and recorded by a live agent. Please leave immediately.
So kind of short, sweet, and to the point, but as you can see, obviously AI detected the motion in the mailroom. And then that's where the human in the loop, the human comes into play and monitors the footage to see what's actually going on. They determine, is it normal activity? Is it suspicious activity? Do we need to step in? Do we need to contact the authorities? And with that live talk down, the individual realizes that they're being watched and recorded by a live agent. Someone knows what they look like, that the authorities are on their way. 9 times out of 10, that's when they leave. And so that's where, with Cloudastructure specifically, we've had a 98% deterrence rate of utilizing that remote guarding aspect. And so utilizing AI technology really does create that return on investment and will improve your net operating income. You can see how that would reduce your necessity for an on-site guard. We have a lot of clients that have implemented Cloudastructure's remote guarding, and they have proven to cut down on their extra security expenditures by up to $100,000 per year. Security guards are not cheap, and they can only be in one place at one time. More often than not, they are distracted. They just don't have a great reputation in being effective. So bringing technology and human intelligence together, you can see how it's more effective. And in the long run, it's honestly cheaper. Cyrus kind of talked about how technology can improve occupancy in terms of reducing vacancy costs. If you have unhappy residents, they're going to leave, they're going to move to a different property. And so, really bringing in something that is effective, something where your residents feel safe at home or have all these additional features, you're going to create that environment that's going to hold occupancy up, which is very, very important in the multifamily industry. A lot of our clients have utilized AI and surveillance in terms of reducing their risks. A lot of clients are faced with liability lawsuits day in and day out. And so implementing this technology and AI in their security systems really sets them up for success in the long run of protecting themselves. And then we've talked about this over and over again in terms of the importance of being able to scale across multiple locations. And so I want to take this and really dive into each solution specifically. And so, Rick, can you talk about how Cloudastructure really does, even though I kind of did already, sorry to take your thunder, but how Cloudastructure can really implement that ROI and what they would see with implementing that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned live guards. If we had $1 for every minute of video we had of a guard sleeping during their shift, I think we'd have more money than OpenAI, right? The on-site guard is a great concept. It's great to have someone there who can intervene physically if the need arises. There are situations where nothing beats a person on site, and the other 99.9% of the time, they're doing a whole lot of nothing, and you're paying for it. The ROI on having every camera watched all the time, guards can't be everywhere. The AI can't be everywhere. It can be all the time, and then the remote guards for when they're brought in scale really well. So it detects things faster. It does a talk down faster than a guard can get there. It's just by every metric you want to come up with. Computers are better and faster at things now than we are. Long time ago, humans stopped having anything relevant to tell computers about how to play chess. They're just better at it. And it's to the point now where computers are just better at watching video feeds and detecting anomalous behavior.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, Cyrus, I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of dive into how ButterflyMX can really increase the ROI, or what kind of ROI they would see by implementing that.
So this is real interesting. A while ago we did something called the NOI report, which was really laying out the different ways that we can help on I think it's like on a typical 250 unit property, Jen. You're running about $500,000 in personnel expenses when you think about like typical staffing, right? You got a property manager, you have 2 to 3 leasing specialists, you have a maintenance manager. Each maintenance manager may have 2 to 3 people under them, right? These costs add up. And so what we really saw was that by having a cloud-based automated access platform, you can do things like, again, my favorite example is the pest control guy. He comes twice a month, or the fire sprinkler system inspector comes maybe once a month or once a quarter, right? To look at those systems or to spray the building. And so by giving them something like a visitor pass, which allows them to get into the building without the maintenance guy meeting them, and then allows them to go around the building. By the way, every room they've been into, because that visitor pass will go like, oh, he was in the amenity space. Then he was in the basketball court, or then he was in the telco room, so on and so forth, throughout the building. It really gives you almost like a time clock for as they make their rounds around the building. But the maintenance guy doesn't need to meet him. You don't need to give the guy a key. You'd be surprised how much time it takes, even with like today's like key management systems, where somebody has to go, oh, you talk to the concierge, let me see your ID. Okay, great. Then they're like, okay, I see that you're approved to be here. Then they got to go to the key management system. They got to find the key. They got to pull it out. They got to give it to the guy. They keep his ID. All of that takes time, and those minutes add up, and those minutes add up into hours. And so what you see is eventually over the course of a month, right, between all these different vendors coming in or dog walkers coming in for the residents or whatever the case may be, the minutes add up into hours and they add up into significant dollars. And so our NOI report, which I encourage everybody to go to our website and pull down and read, really like lays out the different ways in which having an automated access platform like ButterflyMX can help you save time and that time translates into dollars. And so just looking at the intercom, because that report's a little bit older than some of the new systems we have, like with parking garages and apartment door locks. But it was like a $21,000 a year annual savings. So then you start to say, okay, what's like a reasonable cap rate to apply to that? Pick 4.5%. Guess what? Those time savings add about $500,000 to your asset value. Your ownership is going to be super happy. Your regional is going to be super happy. Everybody is going to be super happy, especially the on-site teams, because again, then they can focus on kind of higher value add things that are going to help that property perform the way the pro forma kind of laid it out. And I'll just give you one last little data point because you touched on it, right? In terms of retention, you don't want to have to remarket a unit. That costs anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 between the marketing budget, the commissions, like let's hope you're not using outside brokers, right? So all of those things, the actual time savings on employee staff time, as well as not having to remarket, all add up to tremendous savings based on whatever it takes to implement these systems.
It's great to hear the ROI from each of you for all of these solutions. Obviously, there's so many numbers that go into this, and each of these solutions have a cost with implementing them. But to hear how many ways it can be utilized to, in the long run, end up saving you money, it's so interesting to hear from each of you. So thank you for sharing that. So I have a question for each of you, and then we have a couple of questions from the Q&A that we'll end with. But if you guys could give property managers or even regionals one piece of advice on preparing for the AI-driven future of prop tech, what would it be?
Well, I think the hot sector for AI and prop tech right now is security. ButterflyMX, as Cyrus pointed out, started with that front door panel. You can imagine going up to any one of those and just pressing every single button and saying, Uber Eats, or hey, we're the plumbers, we need to check the leak, or whatever. You hit 20 buttons, 3 are going to buzz you in. So it's not even slowing anyone down to get into a building. There's just better solutions now. ButterflyMX is probably the best one we've seen in that regard. It makes a real difference into fundamental metrics that you may not expect. I mean, how many times does this bike locker need to get broken into, or cars in the garage need to get broken into, or units get broken into before it actually really changes your vacancy rate, before it really starts to hit your primary metrics? It's probably less than you think than it is, right? And AI is here right now, I think, really turning the corner in the space to make a real difference and to do it in a very efficient way with the centralized management that I think we all believe is key to its success.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would just say that, we touched on some of this, but like, obviously you want to make sure there's no bias in the data sets. That's super duper key. So you want to kick the tires on that, as I said before. You want to work with companies that prioritize integrations, because no one company is going to be able to do it on its own. As we alluded to, if there's a door sensor alert, right, that a door is open, you want a company that's going to be able to kick that over to the other platform that you're using, in this case, like Cloudastructure, that then can react and kind of escalate if need be, and then they can do the top down. I think the other thing is, part of that is open APIs, because that's just a signal that you're into being part of a ecosystem, which, oh, by the way, is always going to be evolving. So I think you want to work with companies that are committed to ongoing updates and kind of keeping that open API ethos in place, because again, no one company is going to be able to do everything. So whatever you have, you want to make sure it's flexible, can grow, and can integrate with whatever systems you're considering in the future, right? And remember, a lot of this is just kind of getting solved by people like Rick and me and everybody at ButterflyMX in terms of, okay, what's going on with the property? What do we have that we can kind of serve back up that's going to help the property operate more efficiently?
Right. I think it's important to partner with a company that is ever evolving, because the changes are ever evolving as well. So I think
That's right.
very important. So a couple of questions from the Q&A, specifically from the crowd here. Cyrus, I'll direct this one to you. You did kind of just touch on this again, but what safeguards could I ask for to prevent bias in resident screening, surveillance, or service delivery?
Look, I just think you need to know what sort of training set it's the AI is being trained on, right? And that's a little complicated. Hopefully there's somebody, either a consultant or somebody internal, who's leading the way. Typically it's your CIO who's helping kind of figure out all the technology stack that you're using in the leasing office, at the headquarters. If you're doing new development, it's your construction tech. If you're just kind of an asset manager, it's whatever you're using to manage the asset, identify acquisitions, and so on. That person has to be involved in doing deep due diligence on whatever AI system that you're going to implement. Because remember, I mean, here's another thing too: is if you give them your data set, the actual data set that you've collected of data points in your property, whether it's historical leasing info, whatever it may be, historical rent info, right, conversions on tours, et cetera, you got to make sure that they're not sharing that with everybody else, right? So you don't want to give the keys to your data kingdom away to your competitors, right? So these are, but just a bunch of different things that you need to be aware of. It's super important, and make sure you have somebody who's qualified to lead that due diligence and take it seriously. Take it very seriously.
Last question. This is an interesting one. So Rick, I'll direct it to you. What about network? How much bandwidth am I going to need in 5 years' time?
More than is available today, in all likelihood. The appetite for broadband is not going anywhere. Offering it to your residents, allow them to be working from home, right? They need to be on those Zoom calls. It needs to be perfect video quality and everything else, right? They're watching Netflix off of it, Amazon Prime Video, whatever. You're going to have an insatiable appetite within your multifamily properties for broadband, is my belief. The good news is that Moore's Law is on our side with all this. Moore's Law is that rule that says every 18 months, the processing power of a computer doubles for the same price. And that's held true for decades now, which is phenomenal. Gordon Moore of Intel first came up with the law, again, many decades ago. So that's for computational power, but camera resolution does not double every 18 months, not even close. So broadband's going up faster than video data size is going up. So it gets easier every year to move the data. If you have fiber available for all your infrastructure and tenants' happiness and everything else, you should definitely get it. And if not, you should probably be getting whatever second best you can get for that property. It might be in a rural area where you don't have fiber access. For Cloudastructure, we do use a fair amount of broadband. The good news is we're using the upload, and all your tenants and most of the buildings using download to watch Netflix and stuff generally. So we're using the stuff that's out of channel. It doesn't bother anyone. And, we probably need a few megabits per second per camera to get a low latency feed out to the guard center to do quick talk downs and things like that. So you got, a 30 camera system, 90 megabits per second. So if you got gigabit fiber, you got more than enough. Everyone wants more broadband. It's like having too much money. No one ever had too fast of internet.
Right. It'll get filled over time. I can't, Rick, I used to do, riser and cabling and all that kind of stuff, which I'm glad I don't do anymore. And yeah, you can never have enough capacity on site. If you can get fiber home run to wherever you can, have more access points than you think you need. So push back on construction in terms of, eliminating access points or eliminating cameras or eliminating doors that don't have electronic access control. You're going to need it eventually.
Yeah, if they have a hard time working from home, they'll be out when their lease is up, if not sooner, right?
Yeah. No, look, so there's all the remote work. I mean, that's the interesting thing about Yardy's acquisition of WeWork. That's coming to the multifamily building near you tomorrow. So basically.
Awesome. Well, this was so great, guys. I really appreciate you both taking the time to have this webinar, share some of your mastermind background and everything. So thank you again. Any last comments from either of you?
Big thank you to you, Jen, for moderating, and Rick for having us included in this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everyone time. And Cyrus, look forward to working with your team to see how we can best integrate our two solutions. I think it's going to be a fun project.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. All right, so on the screen, we'll come to an end. This is our next upcoming webinar, From Sidewalks to Settlements, talking about slip and falls, liability lawsuits. So you'll see a pop-up on your screen if you want to pre-register for this webinar. And then if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is up on this screen. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and thank you so much for tuning in.